Give this a whirl. How's that sound? My volume? Oh, my volume is high. Okay. Okay. Important guy. Good morning or good afternoon. Sally. Good day. Hope you are well. Okay. So, I am currently trying to work on. I'm going to jump straight in. I need to make progress today. Oh, man. Not again. A few friends that have fallen foul of quite a bit of sickness recently, like that. Good. Feel better, sir. You know, you can have a little bit of dirt or speck on your glasses, and it's okay. But the moment you turn a key light into your face, it looks like you've got like a dinner plate sized smear of grease in your face. There we go. The bonus of never leaving the house is I rarely ever get sick. Yes, I am. I am definitely due for something, considering I've been traveling every 3 months for the past year. Okay, so tasks. The idea of the tasks is these are, and I probably do need to put a better panel in there to identify these as tasks, but these are the tasks associated with this requirement, right? So in the early version, the problem became that the tasks would not show against the planning item, right? So you could have a requirement, he says, as he finds one with no requirements. You could have a requirement, but you don't see any tasks associated with it. And even if we update the numbers in real time, which was the intention but didn't happen, it just wouldn't work. So hence the attention to getting these in here, right? So add task button. There is a highlight there, by the way. And as again, like that, our epics tend to be very long standing, and I don't think this is rare. Epics can turn into unbounded collections of work where you don't figure out all the requirements ahead of time. You figure out enough to get it started, and then you figure out what changes, and you keep stuffing it in the epic. And the epic realistically works just as a tracking of, you know, how much work you got done. And I think there are other metrics and stuff that you can put around epics, but it's it's classy taking many epics at once for too long a period. Visibility into is important, so everyone realizes, I think. Yeah. So I'm not saying these planning items, right? I'm gonna sneeze. You okay, docs? I scared the animals. Just staring at me like, what are you doing? I wonder if this project has the same problem. In terms of unbounded work. You mean the actual work that I'm doing on it, or the ability to do those sorts of things? I'll clarify before I start to add. Really getting out of focus. Are you attempting feature A plus B plus C plus D rather than do A, do B, and finish at each step? Are we talking about my actual work on it now, or are we talking about the actual tool providing the ability? So in terms of planning, I'm focusing on getting one thing done, right? Other things crop up all the time. That's not unusual. Other problems crop up that might take a bit more priority. But, you know, like, oh, this isn't actually achievable because I didn't think about this or whatever, right? And what I'm trying to do is learn from those things and understand how it changes the course of the software anyway, right? There's a lot of stuff on here. It doesn't necessarily need to be done before we test it again. But, you know, seeing the task was a clear problem in the first place, right? But anytime you're going to involve human beings in the process, we're going to end up with some level of undefined effort because we don't know everything. And if we do know everything, then we've gone so far as to almost do the work, but not actually do the work. And even then, you're going to find some mistakes. As far as my effort goes here, I'm not sure I consider this to be hopping around or trying to focus on too many epics at once. I'm focusing on one specific thing, one specific piece of work, but there's no real epics to work on right this second, being that there is like a lot of little features that need to be added in, which is kind of what this is meant to do, right? This is meant to tighten up some of these pieces and give us some of those larger pieces to work on. Things like changes, like notifications, those are going to be epics because they're going to touch many parts. There's going to be lots more depth to the actual system. But this, no, I don't see that. And as far as the tool goes for providing the problem with the epics, yeah, you could do the same thing. I mean, the idea with the planning item is to guide you to a world of, okay, well, here's what we actually expect from this. If you make that too big and there's dozens and dozens of tasks on it, then you should be able to see it and feel the pain, right? It's not lost in those items, right? If these were stories, because I mean, a requirement is the closest thing to a story potentially. Yeah. So initiatives, right? Initiatives. Right. And then go back here. And then, you know, you do, that's funny. It's not loaded yet, but you get the idea. The other list. Enhancements on current features. Well, some of this is, I mean, the task while doing requirements is essentially an enhancement of an existing feature, right? But that's there because you were one of the first to like actually acknowledge it. I knew it was a problem before I'd even got to that point, but you were one of the first people to say, "Hey, well, hold on, how do I know what tasks I've added?" Right? That was clearly a problem from day one, right? Which is what this is trying to address. I'm trying to, and I am refining. Some of these are just enhancements, like the comments on planning items. These will probably get backburned for a little while because I don't think I actually want comments. I think I want an entirely different system there. Having talked about this a little bit more, I think what I want to do is promote more discussion in the vein of the actual application. I don't think I want comments. I think I want conversation. And if you just leave a single conversation, then that's so be it. But yeah, um, things like planning item dependencies. In here, we also potentially would have requirements, priorities, things like that would also need to be tackled. But I'm not sure, considering I'm trying to use the tool to plan the tool, and considering I'm trying to um, focus on a set of features. So my measure of when this is actually ready to be tested and released next is, do I feel the workflow is significantly improved, and can I go through from A to B into C and onward and use this effectively? What needs to be in there to do that is kind of where I'm focused right now. So yeah, it might be a little bit more random right this second, but that's the problem. That's the problem. That's why systems get out of hand, is because it's, as ideas come around, you want to implement things and you want to do things. So all I've got to do is try and keep a cap on what's a dream feature versus what's an actual required feature, and try and hold that. And to me, adding these things in is a necessity. There's no benefit to doing this otherwise. Comments, all that can go later. Attachments is kind of working. There's a bug fix in there to do. I need to figure out what this looks like. Why this? Tasks. These. Yeah, it's the least amount of development overall. There's just not much to this yet, right? Oh. Well, there's not much to this in terms of its concept yet, right? There's just uh, a board and a list of tasks that you come up with. This I want to redo because there's some weird behavior in it. Um, Probably make this look more like this. We do have to have a conversation about subtasks. I say we mean like, I want to make sure I open that up as a concept, because it is something that I've been thinking about in terms of how best to plan. But yeah. But anyway, my problem for today is, no matter what I do, I cannot seem to get this subtasks really come into effect when you have a ticket whose steps are very intertwined. Yeah. I cannot seem to find this. This effect does not fire. You want that story to stay intact, but a way to say I do this much on the PR. I don't. kind of see subtasks as an organizational thing first. They are sorry. Small tickets are easy to track my own progress and keep myself organized. But there's several times where I've gone to task something out, right? And I've gone like here. This is simple. This doesn't need any subtasks. When expanding the requirement list, task should be created for the requirement and display. Oh, however, there's a whole lot more to it than just this, right? So I could create many tasks, but they're all intertwined, as you say, right? So subtasking this kind of does make sense in that respect. So having the ability for the developer to lay it out as, okay, we need to touch this piece, we need to add this piece, we need to modify, test this, do this, etc., would be a useful thing. I kind of want to prototype that more than I do want to make it as a full feature. But yeah, so it might be adding tasks with a parent task ID, right? That is subtasks. And that's as simple as that on the server side. So the server doesn't really care about that. It's just tasks that are associated with the tasks. Another thing I've added to my tickets lately is a non-technical explanation above any technical details. Well, see, if we well, hold on, I can show that, right? Show it in this one. That is the purpose of that. Right? Because the non-technical requirement is the why you're doing it. So the requirement that drives this task is the intended purpose, right? So that's why because I want to allow the product team to be able to write down what they expect to see in a non-technical way, but then align a technical component to that. I'm not quite sure I follow with why not, rather than thinking of it as an A or B, why not A and B? You mean in terms of the stories, like you have to have a non-technical story or a technical story? Well, the idea is that all these, on this side of the house, all these can be technical. They might not be very technical. Yeah. That's what I'm saying, right? That's why I don't want to make, so the story, right, is the requirement plus the planning item in context. And at some point in your life, at some point in your flow, you're going to want to write, or you're going to need to write something that is quite technical. And then it can't be technical. It's like, well, it's a purely technical story. What do you want me to do? Right. So, a refactoring or a tidy up or a fix of the code doesn't necessarily have a planning item. But it might have backlogged work, right? So you might put technical debt in here that might not exist in here. That I've still yet to figure out how to. I think that's an accountancy problem. Like, of the work that was taken, 80% was actually planned work and 20% was necessary components. But I think that's more of an accountancy thing than anything else. But yeah, the ability to add technical components, technically driven tasks is there. But yeah, the idea is that these would keep it from getting too technical. These would be very much, here's what I expect, here's what I want to do. So a planning item with requirements, requirements really become kind of the stories of. So it's a mini epic, I suppose, in that respect. But I don't know. We'll have to see how. I want to get it to the point where people want to use it, right? And if people want to use it, then they can log in and test it. Um, and it's an investment. It's a time investment. Right? Oh, come on. Restream just logged me out. Really, you couldn't log me out at the beginning. You had to let me go live. Oh no. It's asking me to do a capture. There you go. Okay. So anyway, what I'm trying to do today, um, me too, is I'm trying to figure out how to use the signals to tell me what changed, or figure out some way of telling me, because I've followed multiple different pieces of advice at this point. So I have the requirements. I have this dialogue. When I update the task, I try and mark the requirement has changed in this little service that I created. Right, that service has a signal, right, which is then uh, fetched over here in the effect, which means that when this changes, it should, in theory. Actually, let's make that. Let's now put that back to how that was. Right, notification status. Um, let's change that to state. Right. So I'm trying to, when I add, when I update a task or add a task, the task is a requirement ID, then this is in the requirements component itself rather than the task component. So I don't drag in the concept of requirement notifications into the task component. That would be bad. Just too messy. Um, yeah, I think it's the same thing. Yeah. Come on, restream. Oh, if I close that down, it's not going to work. Oh, okay. Um, no, it's still trying to get my head around it. Gotcha. No, this basically. If I get it right, this will fire whenever a variable that I'm actually watching in the effect is changed. From what I've understood so far. Um, I'm yet to get my head quite around it, but I think the idea is that if I'm watching it, it will trigger. Mojo, good morning. How you doing today? Or I'm just adding tasks for the sake of it. The good news is the task flow is working, which I think is your signals. Yeah. Adding a task. Yeah. So what I need to happen is an alert to happen to say the requirement was changed, right? This is not firing. Now we know this works. We know the shown works because that, but private identifier equals state. So in React, use effect is used for async stuff, something attached to a fetch request. Since multiple states exist, there are promises. I can't just use state, since that would have promise result, then a value result an error. Huh. Rambling Geek, thank you very much for 15 months, sir. I appreciate it. It's been good. How about yourself? How are you doing? Okay. Task again. I don't have to wipe out my database after this. You see, nothing changes there. So this effect is not capturing this signal. But it's not erroring either. We're going to ignore those warnings because I don't know what they mean. So fetch next state catch will be the syntax within a use effect. Where to run away on page load. Okay. Yeah, I think the so effect in this piece in the signal stuff, the way it works would be you're only allowed to use this in certain methods. Is it like putting it in an ng on it is bad. I can get a reference to it, so I can clean it up afterwards if I need to. I just figured out why after 5 hours between yesterday and today why I couldn't save to a table. Ah, nice. So yeah, the effect here is if I understand it correctly, the fact that I'm referencing these things in here means that now I'm watching for those changes when it loads the effect up. That's not the way it's working because I expect this alert to fire because no matter what requirement I change, right, the idea would be when I update the task, and this is hitting, right? Right, this requirement was changed is hitting just for completeness. Yep. Ooh. Ooh, you have tables without primary keys. Right, so we're getting there. We're getting there. We're getting here. We've got identifier. We're setting that state, right? But then this piece, which is listening to that state, which has that state, is not doing anything with it. Only this one, it seems. Of ambiguous errors, or better yet, no error at all. It's why your true guessing ability to test as a programmer. Well, it's where over time you build a checklist for yourself, right? You build that. Okay, here's what I need to go validate. And the code base, lessons from the code base. So if the code base is commonly failing because of missing, I just realized I'm transparent a little bit because I've got a black t-shirt on. If the code base is commonly failing because of missing primary keys, then that's the first place you're going to look. But yeah. Effect not firing on signal. I got that. Hold on. So we're saying that no, because it's a string. The memory's going to change, right? I don't signal string not. Let's try this. So private requirement updated equals signal void. Can't do that. No, it's because it's just a. You can't do that. That's invalid. Type. Impromise Million. Hello, how you doing? Why Angular? Why not Angular? So if the requirement is shown, no. If the requirement is, if we add a task to a requirement, or we add a task, the requirement has been updated. We need to reload the list of tasks for that requirement. Side effects are common term in development. Yeah, I would say so. That's a million. Angular requires a ton of files per component, React is concise. But that conciseness comes with clutter as well, to me. Having the file separation allows me to think properly about it. So I'm able to split my code and my markup from each other, which I actually like. Well, fewer files, more concise, however you put it, right? It's still, but I've tried React. I didn't enjoy working with React. I work with Angular. Built some stuff with Angular, and it's kind of been my go-to. Thank you for the follow. Appreciate it. Um, I mean, ultimately, well, yeah. Ultimately, I'm using what I know because it gets me further forward with this project. If I have to go and learn a new framework or a new structure, um, it's going to slow me down now. So um, I've been a developer for about 25 years. Um, I've been doing .NET for 20 of those. Um, bit of mix. Um, well, React is still in the same conversation, I suppose, Mojo, for most of it, right? So it's React or Angular. Yes, one does a lot more things, but you plug on the extra pieces and get what you get the comparison, right? But to learn a new framework and shows promises it's better, you don't know what yet until you've totally switched to the new framework. But better is still subjective. Um, Best skills for a dev: adapt, learn, grow, uh, keep learning. Don't focus on one uh, particular piece too heavily. The ability to learn and how often you go outside your comfort zone. Don't assume what you know is the only way of doing something for certain. So learning, definitely, I agree 100% on learning. Comfort zone is, yeah, that's measured, right? Uh, I'm not dismissing the point there, Mojo. By the way, I'm just saying that it's just such a common comparison at this point that saying it's not a comparison is not going to move the needle. Um, yeah, I have a job right now. I'll talk when he gets back. What am I doing here? What was I doing? I was doing something. Brain. I was going to see if this works. So what I'm trying to do is see if I can track the computed of it. So computed does something similar. And I've hit this before, where computed, if I reference the thing inside of the computed, it will trigger. So I want to try and see if that will work. So this dot requirement updated equals computed. Will this change anything? Take care, Delta. Thank you. Have a great day. So if this dot identifier, this dot load, oh, will that let me do an async on that one? Let's find out. And that's um um I'm a web developer primarily. Um I do better on the back end stuff. I'm more of a My actual job title is architect. Um, I mean, um, yeah, I get it, my job, but it doesn't. People see it as, um, you know, they see it as apples and apples, right? And that's the way they look at it when they're trying to build something. If they're trying to build a site, they're looking at them and they're not seeing those subtle differences or whatever. They're just seeing the, hey, this makes sense to me and working with it. That's fine. Are you a senior? Yeah, I'm a staff engineer, so yeah. But that doesn't mean anything overall. Not particularly. So I've worked in larger organizations, so I've worked in small companies and big companies. They each have their challenges. They're both. I mean, at the end of the day, most companies are risk averse, rightly so. It means that you should, I suppose, as a talent to learn is to learn how to properly describe the impact of anything you're going to do and not get carried away with the technologies. Um, Make sure you're always able to represent to the business the need in the business need rather than the actual development need. Why are you trying to do something? Yeah, yeah, I've done hiring. What's important? I mean, depends on what you're going for, right? If you're looking for a role, you know, look at what the company does, be prepared for the sorts of technologies they use, and understand, try and find out more about the role before you go for an interview. Um, to me, I care more. Again, if I'm interviewing a junior developer, I care more about the fact that I can have a conversation with them and they can kind of follow along than if they are the most technically proficient person I've ever met. It obviously matters. Um, um, but if you're interviewing for a senior position, then there's a certain level of expectation. You know what you're doing technically. Have that solid conversation. Talk about design. Talk about uh, impact and risks and stuff in a way you're not going to talk to a junior with. But it's matter a lot. Um, I've never had anyone present GitHub in an interview or in a resume. Um, so I've never had the chance to look at people's work beforehand. Um, I'd say being able to point to something is definitely useful, but quality over quantity. And you're solid. Don't just be dumping concepts into something and trying to get, a can you tell someone's skilled just by conversing? You can get a feel for how comfortable they are with the technology. Um, you can get a feel for if they actually know what they're doing. So I'd say so. That's that. So that quite updated. I'd assume I have to destroy that. Let's have a look. No, I do not. It's not a memory leak. I wouldn't say fakers, but I've interviewed people who clearly were not ready for what the role they were trying to get. So what I'm trying to do here is okay. So that's okay. So that's that. If this identifier equals this dot requirement ID, what app am I making? So I am building a tool, a platform for project management and planning. So throughout those few years of development, I have gathered my own opinions on what is missing in software development, what is the whether the focus should be. Good morning, Mr. Lyon. That's that. Please tell me it's coming up. Oh man. No, it's fine. Are you good with JS, DOM, and CSS? No, I am terrible with this stuff. I dislike it. Genuinely. I don't. It's not where I'm comfortable. I'm capable of understanding how to do something. I'm capable of following directions, but I don't like being in this world. It's not my favorite part of software development. So that did not do anything for me. It's never read. And I find that it's changed so much so quickly that I just can't. Yeah, but that's not. So what they're saying there is this. Again, this is why I'm getting frustrated, I suppose, because what this person is proposing is that this needs to be in here. No, it's a product. So let me just see if I can get this. Change notification service. So if we do that. Actually, we do. That's a signal of string, right? And that's set there. And we do this dot identifier equals service dot state. And then this is that. Right. So they're saying that works. So what I'm building is a product management and planning tool. So the goal is to build a tool that allows me to track initiatives, that allows me to track planning items, and planning items are essentially what we call stories in Jira. But the goal is very much focused on getting product management and management to gather the actual things they want in a form that allows them to visualize, here's what we've got, here's what we think we want, here's what we have. We can talk about it in the business terms, and we don't end up talking about it in terms of software, right? We talk about it in the business terms. And the concept is one of, from here, we add requirements to the planning items, and the requirements are what drives the actual functionality. And from a requirement, we add tasks. And the piece I'm working on right now is adding those tasks. These tasks are the development piece, right? These tasks are what the developers are going to work on, built by the developers for the developers. It links back to the requirements, so you can always see what drives this task. And then from here, we can do sprints or whatever, Kanban sprints, etc. in here to provide that. I need to step away for 1 minute. I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. The recycle truck normally goes up that direction and gives me an indicator that they're coming when I forget to put it out first thing in the morning. They didn't, they came down the street. So, yeah. So requirements have tasks and tasks go into sprints, yes. Yeah, so the concept is one of breaking up the planning and the requirements gathering so that product management can gather what they want. QA can validate against these things as well, these requirements. We are driving development of this off an older version of the product. What I'm working on now, seeing tasks. Tasks should update the list. When I expand the requirement, existing tasks should show. When I add a task, the list should show the current status. And I need to show the number. So right now you add a task this way, but it doesn't show you the task. So that's what I'm working on in the new version. Pointing to grow this. Yeah. Yeah. So this is what it currently looks like from a platform perspective. The client, the Angular client here, goes through, and when I'm saving data, it's going through APIs here. Those APIs each have their own databases, so it's not microservice, it's distributed monolith, I think is the right term for this one. when each of these saves the data, Kafka gets notified and the information comes out through Kafka, and then the view consolidates that, and there's a GraphQL API in front of that. Complex? Yeah, yeah, but it works. And it gives me the ability to change it and flex it. Have not even considered that yet. Got to get the vision in there first before worrying about whether it's marketable and whether it solves actual problems. From what several people have told me have said, it does, but we've got to get to the point of being able to build a full workflow through. Is it client state or is it mostly server state? I am using signal stores for state on the client. So it is retaining a lot of information on the client, which is going to create its own set of problems in terms of desync. So coming up with a good strategy for when to ask the server for data and when to be told the server has data is going to be a key aspect. So I don't consider this to be my final version of the UI. I think this is going to be an iteration, and there's going to be another version when I've learned some valuable lessons. Thoughts on OOP? In terms of, I mean, it can be useful. um, to be honest, I think of the problem I'm trying to solve before I think of the design. OOP obviously is a component of that where you start to, you know, design objects and things, but I think OOP is a tool in the kit, right? It's not necessarily something that is good or bad, right or wrong. I think C sharp. So the back end in this is .NET, by the way. So we haven't gone over that part. The back end is all .NET. The general structure of what I'm using is not very object oriented in any way, shape, or form. I'm primarily using essentially functions, right? So even though this is a class, it has one method. I enter into that method. I create an object that has data, and I call another thing where I handle that behavior in a single method in a single class, right? This isn't object oriented. This is just, I mean, it's using some inheritance and implementing of interfaces to design it, but it's not really an object. It's a function that just happens to have to be in a class. So yeah. Where in Britain is your accent? I'm not in Britain. I'm in the US. Um, I'm from uh, the north Manchester in the UK originally, but I am actually in the US. So okay, let's see if we can. This signals thing is driving me crazy. City. Um, the signals thing is driving me crazy. Um, in all seriousness, I've never really. I like the sport. I like watching the sport. City have been a very exciting team the last several years. Not having a great run recently. But I don't follow them closely enough to really care. But my parents were United fans, so it was more fun to go that path. um, I need this signal to work. I can't think, and I'm stuck on. Okay, this is a definite problem, right? Am I laser focused on solving this at all costs? Is there a better design or a better pattern available to me? I'm not going to see it because I can't see the wood for the trees, right? I'm stuck on this. I've got to get the effect working now, and this is a problem. So it doesn't fire computers. So the idea would be that this it kind of by doing this, I kind of have a um. Does this even fire? Like, when do I get that? Do I ever get that? Move this over there. Right. Okay, so if I expand this, go here, expand that, add a task, adding a task. This is adding a task. What happens now? Right. No, it never fires. It never fires the effect. That's completely useless. That's completely useless. That's completely useless. You're useless. You're useless. You're gone. Delete anyway. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're gone. Do you read programming books? Not so much these days. Not as much as they used to. Um, Most recent read I've had was Strategic Monoliths and Microservices. Um, Top recommendations for learning. Figure out figure out how you learn. Don't assume that you learn the same way as everybody else. So figure out how you learn best. I learn through doing. Right? I do better when I'm focused on writing code. Like right now, it might look like I'm struggling a lot, and yeah, I am struggling a bit, but I'm also figuring out what doesn't work. I'm figuring out why something is working the way it is, and that's my way of doing it, right? Might not be easy to watch if you are a go off and read the manual, but I don't do well reading the manual, right? I'm not. This project is about uh 15 months old now. I work on it on stream 3 times a week right now, and off stream as well. It's not open source. It will never be open source. Well, I say that it will never be open source. It would be open source if I decide to scrap the project. Um, I would completely open source the entire thing. Um, yeah. Um, what's the best pattern here? Signals to notify. No, I haven't looked at server rendered Angular yet. Um, it doesn't really have a bearing on this application specifically, um, being that the client is, it's sat in front of a GraphQL API. It's using API calls to go out to the back end. How this is done, this is let's do this in something that I'm comfortable with, but do it enough that it gets the principle, the ideas, and the concepts across. Um, so yeah, and messing around with server rendered would not be high on my list of things. UDB. Yep. So the purpose of that is these are their own sources of truth, right? Planning, items, requirements, and initiatives are owned by the planning component. There's no other component that owns them. All data for them is there. This is SQL. These are all SQL. This is Mongo. Um, this is SQL. This is SQL right this second. Um, this is Mongo. Uh, it doesn't matter what the storage is, and I've done that. I've proven that several times over the past 15 months. In that, this piece right now is SQL again, but this hasn't been worked on in 10 months or more, because the ticketing aspect of this is not the primary focus. It is something that is necessary, I think, in a product stack to have the no ability to do ticketing properly or integrate with ticketing is a mistake. You need to have that workflow of what happens when the customers report things. How do you track that? And if you don't have that support in there from not from day one, I think it's a second version iteration. But I think you need to support that need pretty quickly. By the way, this was using Couchbase, and I think I might move it back to Couchbase once I've analyzed some of the now I understand some of the requirements a bit more, because I think it is a lot about the text. There's not much, in terms of querying and stuff, there's not much going on in here. It's pretty much read and write text, and I think that is a primary use case for NoSQL stuff, because yeah, uh, I can change the schema, I can flex, add parameters onto objects and stuff without actually changing a lot of things. So that's a very useful thing for categorization, etc. But yeah, the rest are all their own SQL database. The benefit of this, by the way, is by having these as a source. What I do is it is CQRS, right? It is there is a command. This writes to the database, and the read happens from a completely separate database, right? These are not being used for reading from, other than the queries they do to get the uh, uh, data out to Kafka. Yeah. So planning items. Well, the concept is that each database owns the data that it's primarily concerned with. So you might have, so here I have a table called attachments in the attachments database. And if you notice, I have a table called attachments in the planning item database. But this is the planning item with the identifier of the attachment. And then that attachment there has an identifier. So this attachment identifier will appear in here, right? So there are relations between rows across databases. No, no, implicitly. There are no links between the databases. That's a key function. There is no queries that happen across the databases. These are completely isolated databases. Planning is not querying tasks. Tasks is not querying attachments. Attachments is not querying planning. Never, right? They produce their data. That data is consolidated in here. So this will have all of these data in some way, shape, or form, and it will maintain relationships. The benefit of that is that those views, and those tables can be built in a way that's prime for querying, but doesn't need to worry about the writing necessarily. Well, it's an implementation that I've wanted to do for many years, right? And I didn't have any uh, chance to do this. And maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. But the point is, I can learn some of the lessons along the way, right? I can struggle on idempotency. I can struggle on, what happens when this breaks and, this is requiring data from it, right? I can struggle through those lessons, but understand them in the context of the greater system. Doing this as well, I also have the flexibility to switch out components. So I can say, I want to switch out um, um, the view for a new implementation because I want to put a mobile client in front of it, right? But the view for the mobile is not the same as the desktop. I could build a new GraphQL API using the same messages that the view gets, optimized for mobile, and then put a mobile front end in front of it without actually changing anything to do with the desktop version. But it's using the same data, it's being fed from the same things. It's not querying the same databases, it's not getting the same queries, it's getting its own queries for the data, but it's getting the same source data. So a little bit more work, but the benefits are there. So oh, oh, that's the challenge. So, and this could be that I need to just rethink how I'm building the components out here in terms of ownership. The requirements screen has on it a dialog, and that dialog, I'm going to remove the event right now so I don't cloud things. That dialog is a generic dialog that's passed a requirement ID when it opens, right? So the idea is that this dialog I call and I pass it a requirement ID. That is the indicator to that task dialog that it's going to be attached to a requirement, right? So it either attaches a requirement ID or it doesn't. So a task can be standalone or it can be attached to a requirement. Um, the list of app requirements of tasks for a requirement are contained in here, and this is given a requirement ID and loads of tasks for the requirement that we currently have. Right. So this is loaded when the viewport shows it. So yeah. So when I click, and we tested this yesterday, right? So when I click, he says when he finds one with requirement. Right now it's not loaded. Now it loads, and now it's loaded, right? So these are my tasks. This dialog is attached in the component. When I add the task, when I hit create, I want to fire a signal that says, oh, by the way, the requirement that I've just attached the task to has changed. You might want to go fetch your list. By virtue of me adding, would that even work? I think I'm at a point where I've got a enough of a mess on my hands. Um, that I might need to refactor this. Detective Gordon. Click add task when the server returns. The component should listen to some change. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Who, when, what. Yeah, I wish it was a bat signal. Oh no, if you've created a mess, just you wait. Well, I'm questioning who owns what data. Um, was he Detective Gordon in that, not Commissioner Gordon? Um, I don't think I've ever watched the full Clooney Batman movie. I think he's always coming. Yeah. So Rambling Geek, the problem is that I've got. Okay, let me try and figure out this. I would think there is some requirement object that is listened to by the requirement view, and the requirement object is updated on the server response. No, because this is why I'm thinking the design is slightly flawed. So I do not attach any concept of the tasks to the requirement, I don't believe. So tasks is its own component, right? And this is with intent. So tasks has a requirement identifier in it. Um, Requirements live in planning items, right? But there's no requirements tasks because there's no need for the planning system to understand what tasks are associated with a um yeah. So the requirement has no need to know about tasks because it can be inferred. You can join that on the client, right? That is a client only linking. Um, there is, but we don't change that requirement. So the requirement never changes. All I'm doing is using the idea of it to attach the task. So I'm not changing the requirement here. Or is um yeah. Language is PG on the channel, by the way. Gotta get ready. Long day ahead later on. Take care, Mojo. Have the best one you can have. Um so the requirement task list is just a list that is going to load the tasks for a given requirement ID because the requirement ID exists on the task. The requirement does not have the tasks though. So is this a problem of the data design or the just the modeling on the client? So we have requirements. The requirement has so a requirement can have tasks associated with it. A requirement does not have tasks, essentially. Tasks can be associated to a requirement, is the right terminology here. When I click this and I add the task, all I'm doing is creating a new task and giving it the requirement ID. The requirement does not change. So what I was trying to do is when the task dialog closes, I knew what requirement it was for because I got an event to say, hey, the task. By the way, this task was loaded. So you call a request to get requirements. These are stored with a task array. When you create a task, the server returns a task. No, the requirement is not stored with the task. The tasks are associated, not necessarily they're not linked to the requirement. So the requirement does not have a list of tasks attached to it. If I loaded the array of requirement, the loaded array of tasks onto the requirement, then this would probably be simpler. But it's not necessarily the right way of thinking about it. Or is it? Suppose it's not terrible. The problem is, how do you do conditional? Hold on. Maybe I do have this. Well, that's what this is. This control is actually past the requirement ID. So when I expand this, it loads in, right? That's actually loaded when I expand. So on the viewport, right? So that's this piece. So it defers loading that piece until it needs to. So that I don't go in and load that screen and all the tasks for every single requirement load. I only load the ones I asked for. Now, if I do attach the list of tasks to the requirement, then this is a little simpler because I don't need to load anything. I just need to attach the task. However, I would need to reload the requirement and its tasks. So what I make up for in one place, I lose in another place. And that's why this is why I'm trying to find, like, I'm trying to set up a meeting with an Angular expert who knows what he's doing with signal stores to see if we can get a stream together and do a stream or two around actually good idiomatic signal store design. Um, this is possible from a data perspective. So right now I get the tasks for the requirement, but if I get a requirement, uh, yeah, planning items have requirements. So when I load a planning item, I load its requirements. So to do this, I would actually have to have the ability for a requirement to have tasks, and that would make this really messy. Because that GraphQL is going to get nested at least 3 levels deep there. And that feels kind of heavy on the data side. So that's why I'm doing it the way I'm doing it. So well, I do add the new one to the tasks, but the task store stores. No, that's funny. Got tasks and it has a store there, but the shared stores. task store update status is the task query load by sprint, load by requirements. The task store does have that piece, and I return that. Yeah, there's no way of triggering. The signals should work. Everything I'm seeing about the signal says it should work. It should listen to. All I need to do is say, okay, well, put a signal around the requirement, and then when the requirement ID changes, can task store emit something like change or new task added, and the component listens and adds a task. Possible. I think the way I'm doing it though, I'm returning a list of tasks here. This is not this load by requirement gives me a list of tasks for that requirement. It will actually fetch from the server. End up back in the. This is what happens when you just code yourself into a hole. I think it's time to be a little bit more aggressive on the changes here. So even if I was to say, hey, the requirement changed, I turn around and load, this fetch is not going to get that data because of eventual consistency. I do need to have it use the store's list, not the actual nothing. The identifier is returned. The task identifier is returned. And the task is updated. So when I add a task, sure, I call add, which sends it to the server, and then I update that version of the task that I've got, and I add the entity to the store so that I have the store has the task. It will have the requirement identifier because it will have been called from uh, the add task dialog. Right, which will have attached the requirement. So the requirement will be attached. The full requirement is actually on the task. They're all copies. I knew this was coming yesterday. When I started looking at it, I was like, the data doesn't seem like it's a in the right place right this second. Um, is a task only ever on one requirement? Yes. Yeah. Well, it can be on one or zero requirements, right? Requirement identifier and tasks actually may be uh, something that we'll be breaking out later. But right now, a task has a requirement identifier. It can be associated with a sprint and assigned to a user as well, but they're separate things. But requirement identifier, yeah, these columns need to go away as well. I think task requirements is probably or requirement tasks is probably a better organization of this. On the client are all tasks stored in a flat array. They're stored in the signal store. can be referenced by ID or by requirement. So I want that event to work. If you are interested in people who are a little bit more capable with Angular than I am, Exokamil is the person that I want to get on the stream at some point to kind of go through my design here. I have no problem admitting that the design is flawed. From this perspective, I think I probably do need to reconsider what who what data is owned by what and when the right time to load it is. So right now what I'm doing is I'm loading the planning items, right? And then when I expand one of these, I actually go and load the rest of the data and I load that into the planning item, right? So on expansion of these, I'm making the request to go and get the additional data for a planning item. So when the planning items load, the planning item store contains everything here. There is no requirement store. That's the problem, right? So the planning items, when I expand these, it goes and loads the task. It loads the information for the planning item, right? The top level information. So it loads requirements, attachments, comments, and the details. When I click on this, these are now loaded into the planning item store. When I expand this, it then goes and makes a request to the tasks store to get all tasks for that requirement, right? That's that component. And the reason I'm talking it through again, thank you, Emperor, for the discussion here, is allow me to consider it. The reason I do it that way is that the tasks can be, I don't want to load the tasks up with requirement because they can be quite large, and that's quite a lot of data to gather when I might not want to be looking at requirements. So I don't want to load that in unnecessarily. All requirements listen to the requirement store, mean task store. No. Nothing listens to the task store. That's the thing. There's no eventing. There's no effects on the stores. And maybe that's something I can do, but I don't know how to do right a second. So, um, I think there should not be a task store pool of all tasks. Each requirement should have their own task array that can still be loaded in the same way from the server. So it's nested, not relational on the client. I think there should be a task store pool of all tasks. Each requirement should have their own task array. They can still be loaded in the same way from the server, and each requirement listens to their own task array. Right, but that the only way of getting to that right the second is to build a GraphQL endpoint for requirements. Otherwise, I allow requirements on tasks, on planning items, to load everything you might want in one go, which would be horrible. So if I was to present, right, so if we got a planning item and we do requirements, right, and let's say this also had tasks and this had title and description, right? And these requirements had 2 or 3 dozen tasks. This object that returns would be massive. So I'm trying to avoid that. My other option would be to still allow requirements to come from this, right? So you could still potentially do it, but also provide a requirements root object that allows me for a requirement by identifier, um, similar to this, a singular version, and allow me to get a requirement with all its associated tasks. I think it can all be loaded from the same endpoint, but that's going to be messy. I don't want to do that. I don't want to load all those tasks up. If you're not asking for the tasks, if this loads 150 objects and there's 300 or 400 tasks, each with their own chunk of description on them that could be, paragraphs long potentially, that's going to be a lot of data to load in one request. Even if I do it on this request for a single planning item. Right, but even if I do that, so when I click this, load everything, tasks and all. And again, maybe it's just a patterns thing. Maybe I need to consider how do I gradually add the data? Because I'm loading it into the screen, right? Still a task at the same time. You just store them in the requirements themselves, but they're not in. But the requirements are not in the. That won't. How does that change very much? Right, but the requirement does not have its own. There is no signal or store around the requirement. It doesn't matter about that. And to put them into the array, if I was to flip this, right? So uh so planning items store, right, is where I'm going to load the requirements, right? Because when I load when I load by identify, this is when I load the actual detail. So this pulls the extra detail in and then updates the entity, right? So this fetch one here is what pulls requirements, etc. So I get the extra data. So when I click expand here, that little loading thing appears. That's what's getting called there. Now that data is loaded into the planning item, right? So the planning item now has its details, its requirements, its attachments, and its comments. To load the tasks for that requirement, right? But that means moving the tasks piece into the planning item store. That's all I'm questioning. All the tasks piece moves into the, so there is no task store, there is only planning items to do it that way. So I get what you're saying. So when I do this, when I expand it, this call I make here, instead of doing it from the task store and loading them into the tasks and then sending back the list for the requirement, basically just put that piece into the requirements. So I only load the tasks for that requirement. My my main store doesn't really change, but it does. That's the problem. Because then when I go to this screen, if I do it that way, these are the task store, right? The requirement is there. Yeah, I get the concept. I think my data modeling on the client side is broken though to do that, to support that properly. I think anything I'm going to do there is just going to be a hack in, because again, it doesn't seem right to put tasks. What I'd have to do to achieve that is actually put tasks in here. Well, I get the difference. I get what that would do. And it's not necessarily wrong. What I'm saying is to put tasks in here, I'd still have to maintain tasks in the store because tasks are a larger thing that may not have a requirement attached to them. They don't necessarily have to be attached to a planning item that isn't showing right this second, right? So the idea is that when you go to the tasks list, you're not focused on it from the requirement perspective. You're focusing on it from the, well, planning item first, requirement second, and that would, so I'd need to still maintain this store. So I'd actually end up writing it in two places, which seems error prone. Not seems, it is error prone because I could miss something in one piece and end up with missing data. So I don't disagree that saying that tasks are a subarray of requirements is pretty much the right way. Nested relation just when the server returns. I think I think a combination of what you're saying and what I'm saying is probably the truth here. Um, the mess is still need a trigger. So the nested relation just when the server returns the creation of tasks, it updates both the store and the nested array in the requirement. But I can't. But it can't do both in one. Like I would need to explicitly update both if I was to put it in the actual task store. That's the problem. Now I can do a combination of what I said in terms of that. In which case, what I do is I do have, right. I do have the ability to do tasks here, but I don't use it there, and I have a requirements piece that allows me to query just that extra information on the planning item and add the tasks in afterwards. But it wouldn't. The problem is there's no signals between the two, so it wouldn't matter if. And again, unless I'm wrong, even if I create it as a nested array on the requirement, there's nothing linking the actual task store to that list, right? If it was kind of pointing at a subset of that list, that'd be great, but it's not doing that. So I would have to make it so that when the task returned, but that task dialog does not. It's very requirement driven. But I can't update both in one go. Very frustrating. Very frustrating. Again, this is Strandhorn. Good day. How are you doing? Do you critique viewer apps? Uh, Not many people ask. I mean, there's Discord if you want to drop anything in there, like viewer projects, and allow other people to kind of take a look. More than welcome to do that. Not bad. Just getting frustrated over. I've not really achieved very much today. It's been a frustrating stream from that perspective. Trying to figure out how the heck to structure this appropriately so it makes sense and meant you specifically critiquing it live. Not something I generally do. I do try to focus on things I'm working on the stream and not make it about um, that. Um, Not many people are looking for live feedback and on what they want, so they don't often ask. That's why there's a Discord channel there for it. Trying to figure out whether the organization is wrong or my understanding of how to use the right technologies is wrong. So planning items have requirements. Requirements kind of have tasks, but tasks are associated with requirements via trying to figure out the relationship direction here. So a task can stand alone, or it can be associated to a requirement. So a requirement can have tasks, but a task does not necessarily have to have a requirement, right? So the way it's modeled right now is the tasks are their own thing. They have a requirement ID. What I'm doing right now is trying to show the tasks that are associated with this requirement inside of the requirement. But when I add a task, I need that list to update. The problem is I'm trying to figure out how to make a signal happen that says, okay, change this. This list was changed, reload yourself, which is great, except it's still flawed because of eventual consistency. So that task might not have made it yet, and calling load will not result in what I think it should result in, right? Because what it result in is an empty task, basically, because it'll say, oh yeah, I've got the ID, but I've got no data, or whatever. Yeah, no, it should do. It should load. But either way, it's well, I do have a pub sub. That is the intention long term. I've got to figure out that model as well. Like, how do I push data down that I care about, and how to decide what I care about? But in this event, what I'm trying to figure out is, and what Maximilian here has been trying to like walk me through is I don't want to load tasks when I load requirements. So when I load the planning item, I could load everything in, including all the tasks, but that seems really heavy as an object because it could contain quite a lot of data. But then if I do it that way, I've then got to maintain that list on the requirement. When I add a task, update the task store, because the task store is also driving this, right? So that same task store is driving everything about tasks. So I don't want to duplicate the data unnecessarily. And having it there won't necessarily solve the problem, because even if I have it as a list of the requirement, I'd still now have to maintain it in two places, and the signal wouldn't do that. Well, changing the list on the requirement tasks would update this absolutely, but I'd still have to do that explicitly when I've changed it, when I've added the task. So it's kind of a, am I trying to be a little bit too clean with this? I'm not sure. Yes. I'm trying to make sure that I'm looking at it from multiple angles to make sure that whatever changes I make, as drastic as they might be, are the right changes, but I'm not just jamming stuff in. In requirements, listen to a signal from the task store, because I think they just listen for a new task, check if the requirement ID is the same, and then append it if it is, or ignore if not. Well, that's what I was trying to do. That was my first, that was kind of my go-to. Um, it was more, this list had a signal that I was trying to listen to, that when this changed, when this thing happened, right, when I added a task, I would signal it, and that would tell it, hey, go get your data, right? The load task for requirement, which should then turn around to the signal to the store and get the data. But signals are not doing what I expect them to do. I'm not subscribing to the signal properly. All requirements that are created need to listen to that signal. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is here. I thought I was on something with the signals. I've tried multiple versions of the signals for tracking this, done different injections. Yeah. Or the task creation manually goes into the requirement store and loops through and updates some of the new tasks. Yeah, that's, see, that's the problem with doing that, is that's a side effect, a messy side effect that would easily be lost in maintenance, right? So I've got to be careful with that sort of stuff, because that's another step that, right, I don't want to be doing something extra. That's the problem. I want to be able to do something that is just, there is one way. um hey Bunda, how you doing? Where's this project maintained? It is in GitHub, but it is a private GitHub repo. This is a private repo, unfortunately. This is um, a large project that, if I ever decide not to make it a product, I will open source, but it is not easily explained from a design perspective, so it's not something I want to open source. Yeah, the parts of it are stored in GitHub. The client is its own repo. The backend is its own repo. The backend control tower is its own repo. And there's a core library that sits in between called Foundation that they both share components of. But I'm always happy to talk about this. I'm happy to go into it in more detail on Discord if you have specific questions about the design. I'm happy to share stuff, but it is not open source. I apologize if that's not what you're actually asking there for, but I just wanted to clarify that as it's a common question. Seems either each created requirement must listen to a signal from the task store that a task is created, or when a task is created, loop through each requirement and tell them directly. Yeah. Yeah, I think I need to get the signal in the right place. It should be firing from everything I'm reading. There's no reason why that signal should not be triggering to say, hey, by the way, a task was added. The task list. So a way of doing this, and the way I first started with, was so in here, right? If I had a signal, right, public requirement changed is a signal string, right? Actually, I had this as let's try this equals input not required. Right. So if we do that, and then if this dot requirement changed, alert requirement changed. So what I had initially was in here, I had a public requirement changed equals signal string, right? And then I did this dot requirement change dot set task dot requirement ID. And then in here, I did a task added event emitter. So then when task was added, we set the signal, and that gives them the ID of the signal of the requirement that just changed, right? So the task, the required task is managed through this requirements component, right? So one signal, and then in here, I need to do requirement. How do I do it? Input not required, requirement changed. Dismiss that once more. I don't think this is going to work. The problem there is that this needs to be that. Why do you not have? Oh, that's that. That's why. That's that signal. So in theory, right, we should get an update. In theory. Now watch this one work because I just changed something. I actually just changed something small about that. Nope. Testing that this was added. Task was added. Yeah, see. So it fires there. Right. Because the signal's set. So this would be, and this dot requirement changed equals this dot requirement ID. Right. What's that? It's a string. Oh, that's because of that. Yeah, that's a weird one. Because it's an I'm giving it a signal. Yeah. So I've tried it both ways. I've tried it with just a string, by the way, to say, okay, well, you can have a signal of string, but it's not worked. But yeah, that won't fire. But anyway, that is that. That is the way things are. Um, okay. But I will keep trying to learn about this. This I feel is probably the most productive way of doing this. I'm just saying, hey, the requirement changed, right? Do what you need to do so that these as they're open would actually listen to this signal and it'd be the same signal, right? Um, for that grouping, and they'd know, oh, this requirement was the one that was updated. But yeah, how to do that, I don't know. I've tried it with that signal string without the signal piece because there I'm handing it a reference to the signal rather than doing the actual signal. So like just doing uh, that so that then that becomes that, right? So it was firing requirement change because yes, there's a signal but doesn't have a value. Um, and then on this side of things, that still should work because it will signal. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I can't remember how I said it last time, but ultimately it should be the same thing, right? So it should be a signal change. But either way, it's not doing that. So I will continue to try this. I will continue to, the task list does that. I have an add task method, and when it might be that I have to combine the components just to make sure that they, because right now the add task and the task list is not the same thing. Maybe that's how I do it. I trigger it that way. But anyway, I have to run. I have a job to do. Um, actually, someone just went live that I think I will take you over to. So I will be back tomorrow with more of this. Hopefully, not more of this. Hopefully, I'll be over this hump by then. I might have to refactor some things, but we'll find out. If you're interested in asking, talking more about this, and talking offline, there is a Discord linked in the cards below. You're more than welcome to join in the conversation. And again, if you have any questions, thoughts, opinions on what I'm doing, I'm always happy to talk about them. Right or wrong, this is the software I'm developing, so um, we won't always agree 100%. Important guy, you take care. May you feel better soon, sir. And yeah, it is uh, Wednesday, which means a one line stream, which I now can't give a shout out for because he just shouted out an Emporium guy. There you go. One line streams his work project, and he's another .NET developer, but works on things like Blazor and other technologies that you will hopefully find as interesting. But anyway, we're gonna go raid Dindle, who is streaming. He's getting back on his feet. He's he's just starting up. Um, so we'll join him as he's starting auction site and working on listing pages. So there we go. He's another .NET developer, fantastic .NET developer, really knowledgeable, and another great place to hang out. So thank you very much for joining me. I will return tomorrow. Take care. Have a great rest of your day. Bye all.